Listen, if you've ever felt like your brows are too thin, too thick, shapeless, or just hopeless really, then you're in the right place, because in today's video, we're going to be talking about the one thing that can completely transform your face, and that's your eyebrows. Hi my loves, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kenya. I've been a makeup artist for a little over 5 years, and I'm on a mission to make makeup as simple as possible for you. If you want to elevate your makeup skills, make sure you stick around. We've already talked about your beginner makeup kit, we've talked about brushes, and in today's video we want to really take a deep dive into brows. So grab a notebook and pen, get your favorite drink, and let's get started. So we're going to start with brow shape, because brows are not one size fits all. Some of us have straight brows, so this one's almost go straight across. They have a very minimal arch. Others have a soft arch, which is just a soft curve that's subtle and natural, and it actually looks very flattering for most face shapes. Others have a high arch, which is that more dramatic peak that creates a lifted look, and it also really opens up the eyes, especially if you have hooded eyes. Now those are just a few examples, there's plenty more. The key here is to work with your natural brow shape, not against it. Next, let's talk about grooming, because the truth is this will make it so much easier when it's time to fill them in. Now there's different ways to groom your brows. You can choose to wax, you can thread, you can use a razor to trim, you can tweeze. So the method you choose will just depend on your preference and how fast your hair grows. The most important thing is to make sure that whoever is doing your brows, so whether that's you or whoever it is you're going for, knows exactly what they're doing. That way they don't end up over-plucking them. And the frequency will also depend on how fast your hair grows back. Next, let's talk about the different kinds of brow products. Now there's pencils. I'm sure most of us have interacted with them, and they're ideal for filling in sparse areas, creating hair-like strokes, and they're quite beginner friendly because you can easily correct and work with them. We have what we call brow gels, and these ones are just good for taming, lifting, and just keeping the brows in place. They can also add a subtle hint of color. We have what we call pomades, and these ones usually have high pigment. These ones are great for creating that nice defined bold brow, and they tend to be waterproof as well, so your brows will definitely stay in place all day. We also have brow pens. Now these ones are liquid formulas, and they usually have a very thin, precise tip, and they're also very good at creating hair-like strokes. Now the only thing is that they dry up really fast, so you really want to make sure that you know what you're doing when you go in with them. But they're also really nice for creating just a natural filled in look. Finally, we have brow powders, which are just nice for creating a nice filled in look. Now my recommendation for beginners is pencil. You want to go with something that matches your brow hairs. Try and avoid going too dark because that looks unrealistic. And then you can also get a clear brow gel just to keep your brows in place, especially if you have very full brows. Okay, let's get practical, and we're going to be using the mapping technique to help us determine where our brow starts, arcs, and ends. So if you're going to need a powder, you're going to need a brow pencil, a concealer, you're going to need a spoolie, and an angled brush just to help us clean up. Ready? Let's begin. So first I go in with powder, and I like to set my brow with powder because this will just help to get rid of any excess oils that might just cause my pencil to slide. You can use your compact or loose powder for this. Next, you're going to pick up your spoolie, and what I mean by the spoolie is just, this is a part of your brush that looks like a mascara wand. That's what we're gonna use, and I'm just gonna use that to brush up my brow. Next, we're going to go in with a pencil, and what we're going to do, and make sure that it's sharp and that it's long. So we're going to align our pencil to the edge of our nose, and this is going to help us determine the beginning, the arch, and the end of our brow. So let's do that practically. So placing our pencil at the edge of our nose, we're going to align it to the innermost corner of our eyes, and that is going to show us where our brow is meant to begin. So I'm just going to mark that. Now let's find our arch, and we're going to take our pencil and we want to align it to the edge of our nose and the center, the middle of our pupil. So edge of the nose, middle of the pupil, and my arch should be somewhere around here, right? And then edge of the nose and outer corner of the eye, and that's going to tell us where we want our brow to end. Obviously, nothing is set in stone. This is just supposed to be a guideline, a map for those of us that struggle to figure out, for instance, where our arch is supposed to be or where our brow is meant to begin. Now that we have this in place, we're going to join the dots. So I'm gonna start at the bottom. And what you want to do is just make sure that you're drawing as close as possible to where your hair strands begin. I don't know if you can see, so don't go too low and also don't go too high, right? So we're gonna move from here, and I'm going to use a very light hand. So where the arch is meant to be is where our brow is supposed to drop. So even at the bottom here, we're just going to slowly begin to drop until we reach the end right there. Now obviously it's also a bit easier for me because my brows have been groomed, which is why I recommended that before we got to this step. Let's do the same thing for the top part of our brow. Just want to stay as close as possible to the brow hairs. Using a light hand, I'm going to connect point A to point B. And then now we're just going to drop down just like that until we get to the end. And now at this point we can wipe off this bit. The next thing we're going to do is fill in the brow, so make sure your pencil is still sharp, and I'm just gonna use light hand, fill in using light strokes. After filling in, I'll come back in with a spoolie and just use that to brush. And what this will do is that it will help the pencil blend in with the brow hairs. And if you've deposited a lot of color, it's just going to help diffuse everything. So we're going to keep going back and forth. Come back and fill it again. Going to define this area a bit more. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll come back and conceal. Okay, so we started off with a bit of powder, so I'm just gonna do that again. I'm going to use my spoolie just to see what we're working with. I'm going to pick up my pencil and we're going to use the same mapping technique. So remember, edge of the nose and innermost corner of the eye is going to help us determine where we to start. Edge of the nose and outer corner of the eye is going to help us determine where the brow is to end. Edge of the nose and middle of the pupil is going to help us determine where the brow is meant to arch. It's time to join our dots, and we're going to start with a very light hand, staying as close as possible to where our hair strands are. This is where the drop is meant to happen, so we're going to mimic that on the bottom. Join to the end. Do the same thing for the top, lightly. And it doesn't have to join perfectly to this because this is just supposed to be a marker, but you can now just come, and because it's just going to be an indicator of where the arch is supposed to be, I'm gonna go a bit lower than that because I don't want it to be too thick. Staying close to my brow hairs and then dropping it here. If it's looking a little crazy, please don't worry. We are still on a journey and we're gonna make them presentable by the end of this video, okay? So the next step is to fill them in, and for this step you want to make sure that your pencil is sharp. And then we're just going to go in lightly, just mimicking hair strokes. Going to fill it in, and we're gonna do this as opposed to just shading in, okay? Once we've done that, we're gonna pick our spoolie, and remember we said that the spoolie will help to blend the pencil with our hair strands. So anywhere where you have any sharp lines, just make sure you go over that area with the spoolie, just so it looks a bit more natural. We're gonna go back in with our pencil and just come back and fill it again. And you can go back and forth a couple of times until you're happy with how your brow is looking. So for me, if you look at my brows, they're actually not balanced. This one looks like it's gone a bit higher, and we're gonna come back and correct that. But what I want to do, just to create balance between the two, is I'm just going to lightly fill in this area just a little bit, just so there's a bit of balance between this area and this one right here. They're not always going to look like twin sisters, but we want them to look like they're related, okay? So just going to fill this in lightly. And this is what you do when you have sparse brows, or you know, if you don't have a lot of brow hairs, use the mapping technique to show you the points where the brow is meant to begin, arch, and end. And then when you have that in mind, now you can make adjustments. You can make your brow thicker. You can fill in the areas that are looking a bit sparse until you're happy with the end result. So that's what I did right here. Okay. Next, we're going to go in with the concealer, and this will just help us clean up where we've made mistakes. I'm going to be using a flat brush. Now you can use whatever brush feels comfortable for you. So I've used a little bit of concealer, and I'm just going to somewhere over here. I like to start somewhere halfway through the brow, because the first time I place the brush on my skin, that's when it's going to deposit the most amount of product. So I don't want that to be here. And so what I'm going to do is again try and recreate, just mimic the line that we have here, but now I'm doing it with concealer. So this will help to just fine-tune the line, clean it up. And if you want to make your brow thinner, you can also just go in a little. So just go bit by bit. Keeping our map in mind, that is meant to drop down here. I like to pull it down this way because this will just make it easier to blend. You just want to work with a little section at a time, and you can use just the tiniest bit here. Now I'm going to come back in with a fluffy brush and just use this to blend. Make sure you don't wipe off your brow, just blend in that concealer until it disappears into the skin. Now you can choose to leave it this way, but if you'd also like to correct the top, like the little mistake we have here, you can go in with foundation. And the reason why we want to go in with foundation, to give us a more natural look. Just going to start to clean up, staying as close as possible, bit by bit, then dropping off. Now because this one is looking a bit weird, I'm just going to wipe it off there, just a tiny bit, just so it's clean. I'm going to go back in again with a fluffy brush. I'm gonna use that to just blend the foundation in, and also just go back in with a spoolie, just clean up the bottom, pull it down that way so it's easier to blend. Just use a tiny bit here. You always want to make sure you're looking at both sides, because sometimes you can get so focused on one brow, and then when you come and look at the other and you realize that you have two completely different brows. Going back in with our fluffy brush, and I'm just going to use that to blend out the concealer. Let me just prepare you, especially when you're just starting out. Sometimes you'll go in with your concealer brush and you'll wipe off half the brow. Please don't worry, that's just part of learning. You just have to go back in with a pencil and try again and again. I'm going to clean up the top with foundation. We're all done, and I hope you can see the difference that it makes. Now please remember, when it comes to brows, you have to practice quite a bit. In fact, I remember when I started out, this was one of the hardest things for me to learn, and I believe that I'm still getting better every day, but hopefully the few tips I've shared will help you start on your journey. Remember, progress is always greater than perfection. We want them to look like sisters, not necessarily twins, okay? That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something from this tutorial, please consider subscribing, give the video a thumbs up. In the next video, we're going to be talking about eye makeup, so you definitely want to stay tuned for that. Remember, I'm always rooting for you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Mwah.